everyone. Welcome back to Frenemies, the podcast where sales and marketing talk. Today, I'm joined by MC Silfer, who is the head of community and events at Zensai, and I'm very excited to talk about everything communities in B2B in female leadership. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Julia. It's such a pleasure to be here and talk about this topic that is kind of dear to my heart and to my everyday life now. So thanks for the invite.
Very welcome. I'm so glad to have you on. So we, as you say, close to your heart and close to your everyday life, we know each other through communities and the Copenhagen network, but most importantly through Women of SaaS, where you actually are the lead of the Copenhagen chapter. Do you want to dive a bit into that? What Women of SaaS is, and of course, this great community you're building and shaping there in Copenhagen.
Yeah, so I am actually co-leading Women of SaaS with the amazing Jasmine de Guzman as well. And
Absolutely.
it started off around a year and a half ago. And my journey with Women of SaaS began before that, actually. I knew the co-founder, Julie, in Berlin and reached out to her and said, let's start something in Copenhagen. And since then, we've grown. I believe we have now 14 or 15 hubs globally. So it's not just in Europe, but it's also in the US and further afield. And it's a fantastic group, but we are a network at heart. So the premise of Women of SaaS is to make sure that women have an equal seat at the table and to make sure that women can further their careers and help each other to do so by doing that through the network, which is super empowering. And also to co-lead this in Copenhagen means that we get to meet many different women in different SaaS companies at different stages in their journey. And I think that's what makes our network unique as well. I do also have my own community for sales women, which I started 2 years ago now. We have our 2-year anniversary. And that's also is something close to my heart as well. And that started when I moved into SaaS, when I moved into sales originally. And that basically, I would say, was a spearhead for me to get into community originally and realized that I had a passion for community far greater than sales, actually. So that's how I kind of transitioned into the role that I am in now. So
yeah, it's super exciting, and it's such a pleasure to, first of all, of course, have the opportunity to join. So again, obviously, a big wave to Jasmine, but also the Women of SaaS events. I have joined quite a few of them, and it is fantastic to connect. The topics are super relevant, and it's just a great platform to meet, connect, share stories, but also get input. So yeah, it's wonderful what you've brought there, and obviously also a big part of why I wanted to speak to you about communities, because I see it as something you live and breathe and do. And as you just mentioned, your SaaS sales community you built back then, was that the point where you noticed that there is a real need for communities in B2B?
yeah, definitely. So the reason I founded Sales Women Unite originally was because I couldn't find a community here in Copenhagen that did the same thing. I was looking and I was like, I really feel like I need this peer-to-peer interaction. I loved my sales team at that point, but I was the only woman on it. And I thought, okay, maybe there is other women out there that feel like they need to connect with other sales women. And that's why I founded it and it kind of started originally. And I've just had the most positive experience building it, and it's grown tremendously. Not at the extent of Women of SaaS. I think Women of SaaS is a larger organization. It's a global organization. It has that brand out there already, but we're a smaller, more intimate community there. So it's nice to kind of lead these two communities that are so similar in their essence, but vastly different as well. So it's quite nice to see that. And then, of course, I just started my role at Zensai as well 3 months ago. So I'm still pretty new. And I'm building up kind of the community program there, which takes time. It takes a strategic mindset as well. And I think community for a lot is quite a new concept, especially in B2B. And I'm sure we're going to cover that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. like in my own B2B journey, in my own career journey, communities, I think it's really a past COVID thing that at least when I paid attention to it and when I joined the first communities and events and so on, I think something in the COVID time happened that opened up that demand in a different platform and shape that you normally find in the workplace, where you certainly also connect with people and so on, but to go beyond that normal scope to find and meet, and especially so for me, I think also in person.
Yes.
So I at least that's, of course, we all paid attention to that after COVID, but especially in B2B, I think there's great examples of communities in B2C. But for me, that was at least a breaking point where I noticed, okay, there are a lot of communities, there are in-person events happening again, and this creates something valuable for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. I think COVID was definitely kind of the catalyst to this. People felt a need of human interaction, connection again. And a lot of these communities started online during those COVID times because you were separated from your work colleagues, you were working remotely, people were getting quite lonely. And I think that's how some of these communities have been super successful, because they started firstly online. And like you mentioned, suddenly then the world opens up again, we can meet in person. And now I think more than ever, with the rise of AI and marketing just being completely saturated, let's just say, that the need for doing things that are not scalable, I feel, is even more important. So doing smaller, more curated events, community-focused initiatives, I think are going to be the differentiator for some of these B2B companies out there.
Yes, absolutely. And also, as you just spoke about the differences between the two communities you're leading, for me, being a participant and somebody who engages in communities of SaaS on your end, but others as well, I think the interesting part of that is also this common denominator between the attendance. And with Women of SaaS, the common denominator is, of course, like the industry background.
Yeah.
But what is so empowering and uplifting and inspiring is the different profiles and departments and people you connect with, rather than, for example, other marketing focused communities. But with your professional lens and your job hat on, how do you see that B2B companies can use that and find that common denominator to create and develop a community?
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest part. You have to find your why you're doing this, and why would people want to join it. And I think, let's just face it, a lot of B2B companies, especially if you're in marketing, it's a lot about how many leads can we get in? How does this affect pipeline? I really, really see community being across the board. And it's not just for getting leads in. So it's about building trust originally. So it's definitely on the kind of brand side. And then you have the demand side as well. So those that are in your pipeline, how many kind of nice fireside chats, roundtable discussions can you do? And then you've got your customers as well. So you have customer community that, of course, you need to, again, build even more trust. You need to make sure that they're adopting your product, and you need to be doing more with your customers. So I think this is kind of how I see community being the glue to B2B SaaS companies in general, but it can be B2B companies or any brand, really. It could be B2C, anything. And actually, if you look to B2C, they do it really, really well. Some B2C brands that I know were built on community. So it was community first, and then they, of course, sell their products. So I think that's how I see community, which I realize is a very, very broad kind of aspect for any community manager or head of community to deal with. But I think it's about leveraging your team, making sure that you're also leveraging your customers. How can your customers speak to your prospects more? And how can you make those small events or initiatives that they can do that? It's kind of my 2 cents. Maybe you've experienced it also, Julia, in some of your past roles of building something similar.
I haven't built a community as such, as you're describing yet.
Mm.
But obviously, like with events and so on, same as you pointed out, I see that red thread, and that is the method I take to marketing focused on growth and brand. I mean, all of these things is a connecting factor that marketing should integrate into their day-to-day work, but also in their strategic work. To think of it as like a comprehensive strategy that goes beyond just leads, but actually covers throughout. That's obviously why I'm also a big fan of sales and marketing alignment and working and collaborating closely there to actually give the foundation and the ground for that to be a red thread and not something that ends at the moment a lead is handed over or with a KPI that a certain department is part of. But I brought up the aspect of that common denominator because especially in B2B, the target audience and the groups can be smaller because you have a buying committee, you have different buyer personas. So that's for a single company to shape a community and build a community behind their product is where I see a lot of complexity to create a common denominator for a group that is large enough that of course also can grow. But your involvement that you pointed out of customers is, I guess, a great starting point in doing so.
Yeah, I think you need to find out first off your customer challenges, what they're challenging with in their day-to-day life, how your product plays a part in that. But I would say don't concentrate on your product, concentrate on the challenges. And how can you build a community that helps those challenges or helps connect people to talk about those challenges and how they're solving those? I think that is where kind of the community aspect fits in. And I think that can be done through multiple different ways and different channels. I mean, you can't ignore LinkedIn for kind of B companies as well. Like, how are you leveraging LinkedIn would be kind of my first point to any B2B company that is thinking about community. And how are you using that community on LinkedIn as well? And by community, it can mean a lot of things as well. It can be your customers, it can be influencers in the space, and it can be thought leaders as well. So seeing kind of different personas that can either join you in any kind of initiatives, digital or physical, or it can even be that they are talking about your product or talking about similar pains that you are also trying to solve. So, but I think it's definitely you need to find the why you're building this community and why it matters to your ICP, so to who you're trying to sell to. And I think that's the hardest thing with community is to build the trust. So this community is here not to sell you things or to upsell or to, this is to make sure that you're making a safe space where people can come and share their challenges with peers that maybe they know, maybe they don't know. And that's the kind of really nice, I would say, red thread that needs to carry through. And also then needs to carry through to your leadership as well. And I think that I see a lot of community managers struggling with is I've had several conversations with community managers where they're like, oh, I need to show results in 3 months. And I'm like, it's going to take you 6 months at least for people to even know that your community exists. And it's going to take you a year to build that trust. I would even say 2 years, which of course, for any kind of, I would say, stressed B2B SaaS company seems a very, very long time, especially if you're venture backed and you have the board breathing down your neck. I wouldn't say, I think community is there for the long gain, not the short gain. Then put money into Google Ads or whatever.
Well, that's nearly always a possibility.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what makes communities so interesting. And it's, as often I find in B2B marketing, of course, there are always like tactics you can use that have a shorter run rate and drive results faster. But it is often in the consistency in exactly this long haul game where you find the real value because you're actually building for the future. But that's also what makes communities so interesting, complex as its own activity and way to engage with your ICP and with customers.
Definitely. And I think it makes it complex, both externally and internally, when you're thinking and planning what marketing initiatives and activities you're going to do. Where does community fit in there? How does community help also enabling partners and customers and so on and so forth? And generally, generalizing here, but usually it's only one person that is heading community. And then maybe they have, of course, some people doing other initiatives like event marketing or or content or social media or things like that. But generally, it's usually only one community manager, depending on the size of the company, of course.
Yeah, so it's a lot of balls to juggle in the air, as they say in Danish, for community managers. Just a quick deep dive into that. But how do you juggle the engagement with the community? Because several departments are involved in that. I assume marketing for First Touch, and as you mentioned, LinkedIn and so on, but also sales and also customer success. How do you ensure that there is alignment around the touch points and the communication there?
Yeah, this is something that is always a work in progress. So I think, even going so granular as saying who is going to answer these G2 reviews, who is going to reply to these customer messages. And it is always a matter of people's bandwidth and where their priorities are running. So I think it's firstly about ironing out kind of what your role entails. I'm lucky as well at Zensai that we have also a customer community manager as well. So I work quite closely with her. So it's a little bit different. My role is seen as more of kind of brand activation, and then I work with the wider team to do the rest of the community work. But my kind of ownership is definitely around brand and brand community strategy. Yeah, but I think it's definitely that you need to, as a team, sit down and say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And that's what I'm kind of going through at the moment.
Super exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen from both sides. So before my role at Zensai, I was head of community at Sassiest. And Sassiest is a B2B SaaS community. And we weren't a brand, we were a community. So, and now I'm seeing it from another side. I'm seeing it from the brand perspective of, okay, we are a SaaS company and we're trying to build this community and build trust with our ICP. How do we do that? What things can we leverage? How can we make sure that our message is going out in the right way and reaching the right people? And I think it's a super exciting space to be in, especially now, like I mentioned before, with the rise of AI, people craving this kind of in-person community aspect events. Just trying to bring that human back to software, I think is very, very important in 2026.
Absolutely. I think we all already noticed that, but it's just becoming more and more. We all have to go back to in-person and human touch in a world where so many things can be outsourced to technology, which is obviously fantastic. And as a German, I appreciate the efficiency it brings. But I mean, there is a real need for all of us, and obviously also for communities. And now you already highlighted a few things, but if you try to summarize it, what is the most empowering part of both in your work communities you're shaping, but also your extracurriculars, if I can call it that, in bringing people together and in leading and shaping these communities?
I think it's definitely the people. So first off, it's just such a joy to meet such inspiring people, but also being the facilitator and the enabler for people to meet and better their careers from meeting, other peers. So one example would be, I have many, just from starting with Women of SaaS and Sales Women Unite as well, especially, is bringing people together that maybe are going through a job transition or they're looking for a new role, like connecting people that and you could say, okay, I know the perfect person for the role. She's just over there, and you grab her. Having that chance to better someone's life, I think is super rewarding and also really, really inspiring to continue doing community work. I think to be a community manager, you also have to be or head of community or work in community. You have to be slightly selfless. So you're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it for the greater good of the company you're working for or the community you're working for. Is the company or the brand or even the community that you're representing, does it mean something to you? Does it fulfill you? And make sure that it does. Otherwise, it's going to drain you. There is a lot of moving parts that you have to work out. So if it doesn't have a message behind it that you can go with, then make sure that it does, whatever you choose.
That is, that sounds fantastic. But simultaneously, looking at the communities you're leading or co-leading, you are, of course, also a face of the community, right?
Yeah, and I think that is probably just part and parcel of co-leading a community like Women of SaaS. And I am, on LinkedIn a lot anyway, so it just kind of made sense. And I don't mind being kind of the face of the community. So I know I meant selfless, but at some point, yeah, you also need to fill those shoes and be like, no, I have a message to say. I have something to give. And, and I have my own experiences to share with the wider community that hopefully helps them and hopefully also makes them kind of think, oh, maybe I can actually learn from MC, I can learn from Jasmine, so that people, maybe don't make the same mistakes or maybe are inspired by a story of success, or it could be anything. But usually we're talking about some challenges that people are generally feeling in their workplace. And usually that really resonates.
Absolutely. And also you have panel discussions.
Yeah.
Which I think is a fantastic element to it as well, because it gives a great platform to inspiring women and inspiring voices to hear stories that, connect you to their experiences and these shared values, but also, as you say, the challenges and kind of the steps to take to not run into the same challenges or to deal with those. I find very empowering and helpful. So that is a great element you added there as well.
Yeah. And I think what we try and do in those panel discussions as well, which I would say is unique to us, is we're trying to bring women from different departments. So if we have a panel discussion, we try and have someone that is in product, someone that's in customer success, someone that's in sales or marketing. And we really, really do try also to get them at different levels in their career or different stages in their career so that they can share a different viewpoint. Because I do believe that even those that have started their career have something to share, as well as leaders. And I think we can all kind of listen with open ears and learn from everybody's story.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that's why it works so well. But of course, also with alignment and great collaboration as a big passion topic.
Yeah.
I stand for something that I love so much about Women of SaaS and the way you're planning this through.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's like music to our ears.
Yes, but of course. Oh, yeah. So that we covered already, of course, a few examples, but are there any great examples you can point out of B2B companies that have had a very well functioning and great thought out community strategy that has worked?
Yeah, so there are many out there, and I think so many inspiring companies to follow. I got inspired, was it last year, the year before? Chili Piper. They started to do these kind of thought leader retreats. I thought that was a really kind of cool concept, and kind of bringing, I would say, thought leaders and community together in a more meaningful way. I think it was about having meaningful conversations. So instead of going to a big kind of a trade show and just exhibiting there, they did smaller kind of curated thought leadership retreats, where leaders can go and actually have some time by the pool and they can strategize. And it's a little bit more in a relaxed atmosphere. That was quite inspiring to see. There's also a lot of really, really great SaaS companies using like influencer marketing as part of their kind of, I would say, brand and community awareness. One of those is Storylane. I get super inspired by what they're doing in terms of their marketing. I would recommend anyone to check them out. And it would be bad of me not to mention my previous employer, Dream Data. I think they do super well. So from my knowledge, I don't believe they have a community person, so to say, but they have aspects of community. So they leverage LinkedIn, they leverage, again, influencer marketing, and they have kind of a digital Slack channel. And, they do it pretty well. So I would look at those companies. Also, in terms of community itself, really, I get inspired by Wednesday Women. So they were actually built by not being a community originally, and now they've built into being a community, which is quite an inspiring story. So they also highlight executive women every week, and it's super inspiring. They have a podcast running, so I'd recommend anyone to follow them. And of course, Women of SaaS. I can't say
Obviously.
yes. So it's a very, very inspiring space to be in. And there is a lot of B2B SaaS communities already realizing the power of community as well. There's one community as well called Tight Knit. So they are actually a community platform that lives on Slack. And it's incredible what they're doing to enable community managers and making kind of Slack accessible as a community platform rather than just being kind of a message platform.
Thank you. So there is lots to check out for all of us if you're not
I could
already
probably
aware.
talk for 2 hours about it. So.
That's why I wanted to have you on, and I'm so excited to hear all about that and learn even more about communities. One thing I found interesting, or one of the things you just mentioned, is the connection between influencer marketing to communities. Influencer marketing, obviously, also being something that is rather new in B2B, but with the growing impact of LinkedIn and personal branding and social selling, that has of course become quite important. So how do you work with that intersection of influencer marketing and community building?
Yeah, I think first off, you have to make sure that you know the influencers in your space. There's nothing worse than seeing an influencer plugging a product that they have nothing or never used. I think people can see through it straight away. So this is why I mentioned Story Lane. They are really, really great at identifying those thought leaders and influencers in the space that either use their product already, or using customers that maybe have thought leadership status. And by that, I mean they're just active on LinkedIn. They're sharing their thoughts, and people recognize them as thought leader in the space. They're using, like I said, their customers, and then they are making sure that they are talking about their product, but not directly. It's not like this product does this and this and this. They're really going on a challenge, and then they're quite clearly communicating that it's been sponsored by Story Lane. So I think that is inspiring to see. But how it kind of links into community is that you also want to have and know these thought leaders in the space so that you can bring them in. You can do small curated thought leadership webinars. And I see this kind of fitting in as part of community. And I would say that you need to make sure that you're designing those programs around those thought leaders that people want to listen to, that your customers want to listen to, that of course your prospects want to listen to, and also your partners. If you can bring your partners into these webinars as well, even better. If you can bring your customers into these kind of digital events that you're doing, also smaller events, that's, I would say, where the magic is. So I would say influencer marketing has a part to play in this kind of puzzle.
Yes, and I mean, even better if your sales team or leadership team is already a thought leader in the industry, right?
And I think,
yeah.
And that's what we're doing at Zensai at the moment. So we're trying to enable more of our, I would say, executive leaders and more of our leadership as well, and employees to post more on LinkedIn, because that in essence builds this kind of community feel already internally. And I always say this to B2B SaaS communities, like, you need to first build an internal community before you even imagine trying to build an external community. Because if you can't even build an internal community very well, you're not going to do very well doing an external community. So just food for thought.
That is a wonderful thought, but I mean, it makes so much sense. I don't think I've ever thought about it in that way, but it makes so much sense because if everybody internally is standing behind it and has their own thoughts and voice within that, it becomes even stronger on the outside image, and of course also the voice that is out there in the market.
100%. I would always recommend any B2B SaaS community. If you have not thought about community yet, build your internal community first. And by that, I mean employee advocacy, making sure that your leaders establish themselves as thought leaders and they're posting regularly on LinkedIn. And by regularly, it doesn't have to be every single day. No way, Jose. If you have a 100-person company and, each person is posting once or even twice a week, just think of the amplification of that. It's enormous.
Absolutely. I think it's wonderful you make the point of actually you don't have to post every single day, because I see lots of people, and normally right now is the best time to talk about this with New Year's resolutions. And I know lots of
Yes.
people who have like posting more and posting on LinkedIn on their list for this year. So I think normally in January you see quite a spike on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. But if you set the goal to every single day, it can become a lot, because
Yeah.
there is, of course, also time and thought that has to go into it, instead of keeping it at a pace that you are able to keep at a consistent level, like once or twice
Yeah.
per week.
Definitely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. So I love to see New Year on LinkedIn because everyone posts it. And I love it. I love it. I love it. But yeah, by the third week, it tends to be like, it gets less and less. And I think that's kind of key to this is how do you enable your team and how can you make it scalable? So by scalable, I mean repeatable. So how can someone set a cadence? And I'm going through this process now as well at work of setting an employee advocacy program. And I really go with the premise of just start by commenting. So don't even post. Start just being on the platform, commenting, liking, interacting, especially with your ICP, with those kind of key accounts. And this is marketing, sales, your leadership, and then make sure that, you start off small. It's like anything. If you start running before you've walked, I mean, you're not going to succeed. So start small, once a week, then build it up twice a week, then 3 times a week. And then it becomes kind of a habit. I always say, one of my old colleagues, Laura Erdem, she said, now for me, it's just like brushing my teeth. If I don't do it, it's weird. So she makes it kind of a routine. And I remember when I started out, I think it took me like an hour or two to draft a post. Like it took so much of my brain capacity. And then talking to her and she was like, oh, it takes me 10 minutes. Don't spend more than 10 minutes. Now I'm at that stage, but it took 3 years. Now I do stuff just, I would say, 10, 15 minutes. And now you have AI as well at your kind of side. I would say, don't start with AI. Start with your thoughts first. And what I generally do is note down something that I'm thinking. And then I use my lovely AI friend to help me just create faster content. I think you can kind of see if it's been written by AI from the beginning. So I would be mindful of that, but use it as a friend, use it as something that can assist you to make sure that you can stay consistent. And I always say to people that are starting out, trying to build their own personal brand and community on LinkedIn, is find your kind of 3 or 4 pillars or things you want to speak about, what's important to you, and stick to those 4. It could even be stick to 1. Some people I know that are posting regularly, they only stick to 1 thing and they do really successfully. But for me, I'm just so broad and I have so much going on in my life. Sticking to 1 thing would just not be realistic. So I always have my 4 things that I kind of talk about and keep coming back to. And I think that is your anchor and your why. Again, community, what's your why? Is again, why are you showing up on LinkedIn? Why is it important? You have to kind of anchor all of your thoughts to that.
Absolutely. And thanks for sharing a bit on your LinkedIn journey. I have one on my own. I started like 4 years ago, and I was one of the ones that was like every single day, I'll post, and I had like my schedule and my thoughts that was pre AI, so lots of time spent on that as well. But at a certain point, I had to reshuffle the priorities and had to go with, well, life is also life. I can't have like so much of my time dictated on posting on LinkedIn. So I trimmed it down, and now it's becoming more again. But I think that aspect of the guideline of every single day certainly was a part in that as well. And on the like enabling the rest of the company and the teams to post on in the collaborations I had with sales, and especially also enabling the sales team to sell on LinkedIn, but also position themselves. I have kind of bridged that way to start posting also with offering content and offering kind of this anchor or this story to lean into and repurpose content that is already out there that is created to have kind of this first pillar to lean onto in the process of finding the other pillars of what you stand behind, what your personal voice is, and so on. Because of course that is the part where it gets, at least for a period of time, a bit more challenging.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I think the best place to start if you are thinking about posting is your content team is probably pumping out a lot of content already. And you can simply take a blog article, a customer success story, snip it into 5 different posts and, schedule those posts 1 week apart. So there's, and put your own spin to it. So, what resonated with you, why this is important, link it even to kind of market research. That does really, really well as well. So maybe there's something from Gartner or Fosway or some other kind of, research platform that has some credibility. And I think that is kind of, I would say, where to start. And I often meet people, and it's not necessarily that they don't want to post. It's just usually I don't know what to post. And why would anyone care to listen to me? That's 2 things. And then there is kind of I would say, kind of the boundaries, the self boundaries of this feels uncomfortable, I'm not going to do it. I would say all 3 of those only change when you start posting. So yeah, I feel those things, I would say, all the time, but I don't even notice them now because I'm posting quite a lot. When I started out, oh my goodness, I was self-conscious. And I was thinking, oh my God, nobody's going to care at all what I have to say. And then a lot of the time I was procrastinating on what am I going to say and how am I going to say it. So I would just say, ignore all of those 3 things. They are there for a reason. That is probably your self-preservation that we have as human beings. And posting is the only way that you can kind of get over those things as well. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and no, again, very empowering advice. So obviously, for all listeners who are on their LinkedIn journey, just go ahead and start posting with something, of course, you feel comfortable with, but give it a go and don't let yourself be held back.
And it sounds cheesy, but I have a LinkedIn community. I have people that I interact with every single day that I have never met in person. I have also people that I have met in person. And my husband said, this is the weirdest thing ever, MC. I'm meeting people online that come to Copenhagen through my LinkedIn because they talk to me on my posts, on my DMs, and they're like, I'm coming into Copenhagen. And we meet, and it's fantastic. I have made really, really good friends through the LinkedIn community. And it's just a great thing. I think it's only positive things I have got from posting, really, and building this kind of own community for myself as well.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. And lastly, we talked already when it comes to communities and events about in-person and digital.
Yeah.
You already said that most communities actually have both elements, but where do you see communities at right now when it comes to digital versus in-person? And where do you think the future of communities is headed?
Yeah, so I do believe that you need both sides. And this is just so that you reach a broader audience. So it could be like for instance, Zensai, we're a global company. So we have customers in the US, we have customers in Australia, we have customers everywhere. So if we were to just do smaller kind of in-person events, even though they're very, very meaningful, we wouldn't reach our community base or our customer base. So making sure that we have both is vitally important. And also in terms of, reaching new eyes and prospects and making sure that we're getting that new business in as well. And having both sides, I think, is necessary. It's not an optional thing. You need to do both things. That being said, if you don't have the budget, I would say start online. Firstly, it's much cheaper and you can get your voice across. And nowadays, I mean, we're using Riverside right now. You can repurpose this into many different snippets. You can make sure that you're getting your voice out there in multiple different ways. You can put it on YouTube, you can put it on LinkedIn, anywhere basically. So I think definitely start there. If you're a small scale up or startup that maybe is thinking, should we invest in in-person events or should we invest in digital events? I would say start with digital and then go on to kind of the event side. And with events, there's different aspects of events as well. So you've got, big trade shows and field events, which generally are very, very, very costly, where you can sponsor, you can get a booth, and maybe you get a speaking slot or some activation there to make sure that you can reach the right people. I would say this is great, and this is great if you've got budget, but start with maybe your own kind of customer and prospect events first. So who do you want to meet and why? And this is more, I would say, mid to bottom of funnel events. Not dismissing field events and trade shows at all, because they're vitally important. You need to get your brand out there and you need to make sure that you are kind of with the heavy hitters in your industry as well. And I think that's where kind of these field and trade shows come in.
Yes, I can only agree. I think though, like it's a part of like kind of the traditional marketing that is still left, but also of course because it is a fantastic platform for sales to have these
Yeah,
face-to-face interactions with the target audience, but
100%.
also with competitors.
Yeah,
At the same time, I think there is a little bit that fear of missing out when it comes to
yes,
trade shows and events, and somehow it is harder to say no to because the perceived value is very high because
yes.
most of them are very known and popular trade shows.
Yeah, and I think it also comes down to how you're leveraging those trade shows as well. My recommendation always, and I've done it through, I mean, with Sassius, we were arranging big conferences.
Yes.
And my advice to any partner was like, do more, do some activation on the booth, do a fun exercise. It could even be that you do a pre-event. So you do your own curated event before the big trade show happens, executive dinners, lunches, cocktail hour, whatever. Get your brand out there, because sometimes I have seen it anyway, that SaaS companies come in, or any B2B company comes into a trade show, maybe not prepared. They bought the booth and they thought, oh, that's enough. And unfortunately, now it's not. We're in an attention economy. Like, we need to make sure that we get attention in some way or form. And making sure that you do kind of more activities around these events. You're investing a hell of a lot of money in them anyway. Make sure that you leverage them to the fullest.
Yes.
Yeah, easier said than done.
As it so often is, but I mean, that is why we are here talking all about communities.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for the fantastic conversation, sharing your story, and of course, your big passion topic. That
Yes.
was wonderful to have you on.
Oh, thank you so much, Julia. Thank you for inviting me.